Hello, everyone, and welcome to 2024. On behalf of Scott and I, welcome to this month's session of the Wisconsin Bankers Association Compliance Corner. And we hope that your year has started off well. And we have a few things to cover this month to make sure that are on your radar. As normal, we'll have an agenda that we're going to be going through, and we have links to each of the topics that we'll be talking about for further review should you want to go into any one of the topics in further detail. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and switch to the agenda slide so that you can see the topics that we're going to cover briefly here in this video. So first up, we wanted to make sure that you are aware of two new agency videos, which I think you'll find helpful. Also, the FDIC is going after those bad actors that are misusing their name or are including in advertisements that the deposits are FDIC insured, which is not true. So some information there and some reminders there for you. Also, our favorite agency of all times, the CFPB, they have a new proposal out there as it relates to overdraft protection. A few updates from the FinCEN beneficial ownership information reporting rule and the status of the 1071 rule. And then finally, some new legislation that is percolating on the state side that Scott's going to talk to you about as we wrap up this session. So with that, let's jump into some of the new resources that are being made available on the federal side.
All right. Thanks, Heather. And so as Heather had mentioned, just the first topic we're going to start off here is with two new resources, and they are two new videos that the agencies have issued. And so the first one here you'll see is an overview of the CRA rule. And so the agencies, of course, issued their revised CRA rule back in October of last year. And since then have put out this video just in January, just this month, providing an overview of that new rule, of that revised CRA framework. And so this video, it's over an hour long. So there's quite a bit of info in there. It's quite a hefty rule for those of you who have looked at it. But this video, really does a good job of providing an overview of it. There's some good information in there. So there's discussion of, some topics that are worth exploring, such as the new evaluation framework, right? So looking at large, small, and intermediate bank categories, assessment areas, the new community development categories have a section in there. The retail lending test, of course, is something to look at that is discussed in that video. Data collection, among others. So again, take a look at that video. If you're looking for additional resources on the rule, whether you looked at the rule back in October, or looking for a refresher, or looking for a summary of things to kind of help you pick and choose where you want to start as you go through the rule, there's a lot of good information in there. And again, there's a link to that as well as the next video that you can find right in the description below. That next one then is a video from Treasury, and this is regarding OFAC. And so this is actually the first video in a series of an OFAC Basics video series. And this particular video has a somewhat brief tutorial on how to use OFAC's sanction list search tool. And so I know a lot of you sometimes get questions on OFAC on how to use it and kind of the functionality and going through it and how that might integrate with your processes. So this video and the introduction to OFAC series as a whole would be a good thing to look at if you're involved in that area. So keep both those videos in mind. If you're looking for CRA resources, looking for a CRA overview, looking for some tools and resources on OFAC, here's the first video, and keep an eye out for additional videos within the series as well. Then on the next slide, we wanted to talk about some FDIC cease and desist orders that they have issued. And so as you'll see, the title on the slide, FDIC has demanded 5 entities to cease making false or misleading representations about deposit insurance, right? So misrepresenting products as insured that are not in fact insured. And we wanted to include this one as just last month, we talked about FDIC and the updates they made to Part 328. So of course, there's updates to advertising, right? And those aspects that are specific to banks. But then another component we had mentioned was a large part of why FDIC is doing this is to cut back on consumer confusion, right? FDIC is really getting critical about those products that are being misrepresented as insured that are not. And as we know, for the most part, this is being done by non-bank entities. And so that's why I wanted to put this in here. And as we talked about, FDIC is making those strong efforts to stop those misrepresentations. The rule also provided clarity for purposes of FDIC investigating complaints, findings of misuse, right, of name and logo. And again, we see that FDIC has gathered evidence, right? They're looking to build these claims and then take action. So the takeaway from all of that we wanted to give you is to see that FDIC is serious about this. FDIC is taking action. And if you see misrepresentations, right, your customers are coming to you and saying they were on this other site and they weren't sure, they know that you have the logo. And so maybe they just wanted to know more about that, right? And that's the whole part of the effort of the rule. So as you're going through that rule and thinking, how can we make this clear? How can we make this clear to our customers? And maybe updating your websites and everything. Think also about those areas where you can report what you see in terms of misrepresentations to FDIC. And again, we know this is largely coming from non-banks, so it's important to support FDIC's efforts to stop this type of activity. We also wanted to mention, just take a moment while we're on the slide and kind of on this topic as it kind of branches off from it, not FDIC specific, not necessarily bank requirement specific, but along those lines, Wisconsin law prohibits misuse of bank names. So again, along the line of misrepresentations and non-banks misrepresenting things, misrepresenting products, we most often see this in the form of your customers getting a letter. Not from the bank. It's not something that you sent them, but they're looking at this and they see maybe your logo, your name, something on the front of the envelope, and then within the letter indicating or ultimately misrepresenting that this letter seems to have come from your institution. So misrepresenting that, your customers getting confused. And this is frustrating and confusing not only for customers, but for banks as well, that they come in and they say, why am I getting this letter from you? Why are you sending me this? What is this all about? Maybe if it's something related to, a loan that they have, some type of servicing thing or something, making an offer regarding that loan. If you see this happening, if your customers come in and they have these letters, let us know. DFI has enforcement authority. Long story short, again, Wisconsin law prohibits this, right? So making those misrepresentations is a violation of law. DFI has enforcement authority in that law, and we will send a letter to DFI to inform them of this if it's something that we believe to be a misrepresentation. So we like to keep track of that too, to know when those letters are coming along. So just make sure to let us know. We've also created resources to help prepare your customers for understanding that these types of communications might come, right? Just in terms of, well, how do we combat this? Sure, we can report this, but what are some other steps we can take? And the WBA Mortgage Lending Committee has created a resource to help prepare customers for this, to know certain communications will come from the bank and others will not, so that they can help identify those that are and say, this is a misrepresentation. I better let my banker know that somebody is sending this and misusing their name. So take a look at that in our best practices library. You can find that in the mortgage lending section. If you need help accessing the best practices library, just reach out to myself and Heather and we can help you with that. With that in mind, I will turn it over to Heather to cover a couple other topics.
Thanks, Scott. And I'll just add to what Scott had mentioned that in those best practices resources, there are actually two different letters that you can use. One that is used at time, maybe at application or when the loan is closed and you're wanting to give the customer a heads up. There's also another or second letter that can be used early on in the discussion with the customer, even pre-application, to try to catch it before the trigger lead laws come into effect when someone's applying to get the information out to the customer before there's actually a credit report pulled. So some great resources there, Scott. Thanks for mentioning that. As Scott mentioned, there is a overdraft proposal to be aware of, and many of you have probably been tracking this. This was a topic that had been included in their agency's semi-annual regulatory agenda for the year, so we knew it was coming. We have comments that are going to be due April 1st, and the agency has a pretty aggressive timeline here where they are hoping to have a final rule put in place actually by October of this year. So for those of you who are heavily into the regulatory process of rulemaking and monitoring those, that's a pretty quick timeline that they're wanting to get comments in and roll a final rule out. The proposal itself applies to banks and credit unions with assets of $10 billion or more, so that will exclude a majority of WBA members. However, as we have seen often with ideas from the Bureau, there is a trickle-down effect that what gets picked up as an idea from the Bureau may very well then be seen by FDIC or the Fed as a great idea by them. So we do want to make sure that members are aware of this proposal. Scott and I will be reviewing it to comment on behalf of the industry. But there's some concerning parts of this particular proposal. And what we've done is we've kind of boiled down the proposal into two main categories here. It's oversimplified here, but again, just wanting to get some key concepts out to you about what has been proposed. But in essence, you're going to be choosing between two different paths underneath the proposal. One path is that for those that are offering overdraft protections, that the path is one that is an overdraft line of credit, a true line of credit that is subject to Reg Z. So you'll have you'll have disclosures at time of the plan being put into place, or at time of signing the credit instrument, like the 459.0 overdraft credit line. And then there'll be periodic statements that need to be provided to the customer as it relates to that overdraft line of credit. The second option is what they were referring to as a courtesy overdraft. And with that courtesy program, the financial institution actually has to look through what their true costs are, out-of-pocket costs are for offering this particular option. And there's going to be certain parameters of what those costs can actually then truly be. You'll have to kind of show your math that these are the costs incurred by the bank. And so therefore, this is the dollar amount that we're going to be setting for our charge as a courtesy overdraft program. If you don't want to show your own work and do your own math calculations, the CFPB has created a standard of what they expect those fees to be underneath this courtesy overdraft prong. And those numbers are actually quite low. It's $3 to $14 an overdraft, really looking at the cost and loss of the bank. So if you have any questions about the proposal, feel free to reach out to Scott and myself. We'll certainly be collecting responses as it relates to this proposal to our members affected by it. But keep this in the back of your mind that this is a new trend and potentially something that we'll see the other agencies pick up. So that's about it with that particular topic, Scott. So let's move to the next slide. We wanted to make sure that the listeners here were aware of some updates that have come across here in the last month on FinCEN's beneficial ownership information rule. The registry is now open. So for businesses that are needing to file information with FinCEN, they can do so. So that's now open. FinCEN had recently issued a final rule about access to that information. Banks have yet to have access. It'll be forthcoming in a future rule down the road a little bit, but know that the registry is now open for customers that are needing to file. FinCEN has also updated their FAQs, and you can find all that information right on FinCEN's beneficial ownership information reporting website that they've dedicated right for that particular topic. And we've included a link for you in these materials. The Wisconsin Department of Financial Institution also is helping to get the word out about this rule. And on their webpage where businesses go to file documents and collect forms for their business creation, they have information right there on their website. And then, of course, WBA, we have created resources both for your bankers to use, as well as potentially a customer-facing item that you can share with your customers should they have information. Both of those WBA resources are found on our compliance page, and the link is also included in these materials below. Lastly, the Section 1071, we're still waiting for the U.S. Supreme Court to render their decision. Much focus right now is really trying to show how costly this proposal is going to be. to actually implement all the various data points that need to be taken into consideration to launch this. But there's still some work to be done in the court systems. Keep your eyes and ears open on the WBA Daily. Will certainly include links as that court decision comes forth, and then it needs to revert back to the Texas court, as we talked about before. So still some action there. Stay tuned. We'll keep you informed as we're waiting for those court decisions. So I'm going to turn it back over to Scott. He has a topic that we want to make sure is on your radar, and filling in some, you may have seen it in the news. So I'm going to defer to Scott to kind of fill you in with some of the details.
Sure. Thanks, Heather. Medical marijuana, a topic that's always a head turner, and one I suppose that's been kind of lurking in the background the past few years. And so we want to take a moment here to provide you with some updates on what's going on with this in Wisconsin. As Heather had mentioned, as you likely have seen or heard something in the news about this. And then take a brief moment to talk about hemp too, since these topics often go hand in hand, although they are very separate matters. So there is a proposal in Wisconsin to legalize medical marijuana. And I'm not going to get into too much detail on this. Certainly, if anything is passed, we'll have greater detail. But for now, it's enough to know that it would be for medical purposes only, and be run, long story short, by the government, right? And so again, it's a lengthy proposal that outlines how this would be done. But since it hasn't been finalized yet, it's something that as a topic we'll continue to track. We'll be working with our government relations team as this develops. We'll be in talk with those who are looking to support it, and the states, the agencies, for example, were something like this to pass, to make sure that they understand the perspective of the banking industry on this topic and be able to help the industry, help you all understand what it means for your banks too, and kind of how this program is going to be run and what your customers are ultimately going to be working through here. Again, we're something like this to be implemented because, again, it's just a proposal right now. It's just something that the legislature is considering. And so there are resources in the description below that are including a press release regarding the proposal. So you can see right there, the lawmakers are talking about where they're coming from with this, what they're attempting to do. But then there's a number of news articles as well. Some of these you may have already seen or from other sources, but we wanted to include them as they do provide some good context. If you're looking to know a little bit more, again, about kind of what's going on in Wisconsin, as it can really be changing from week to week as the lawmakers work through this proposal and kind of talk through what they think would be best in this regard. Of course, all that said, please don't hesitate to reach out to us as well if you'd like to talk more, just to talk more about what it means, kind of what the proposal is about, kind of where we're at or where we might be going to, if you have any questions or concerns about how it might impact the banking industry. Now, just really brief on hemp too, because here there's nothing new, but we thought it would be important to note the main takeaway really being that hemp is different than marijuana. And again, the reason being, oftentimes these two come up because they do both include THC, which is the chemical that is really under scrutiny from the states and lawmakers, both on a state and federal level. And when we were talking about hemp, when that was coming around, often that's what I mean, that marijuana was lurking in the background of, okay, well, if we're legalizing hemp, is marijuana going to be next? Many states within the Midwest, right, states surrounding Wisconsin have taken steps to legalize marijuana medically and recreationally. And so that's what I mean when I say they go kind of hand in hand. Now in Wisconsin and federally, hemp is a legal commodity, right? So there's no prohibition on hemp. There's no specific research program like we had in the past. Many of you remember, it is just a legal commodity. It is regulated, but it's a legal commodity. So just like any other regulated industry, you can do business with hemp customers. The considerations there would, of course, again, be similar. Talk to your BSA officers, talk to management, talk among the bank to understand what your expectations are in that area. And if you want to know more about the industry as a whole, or kind of what those considerations might entail, and the regulation, we have some resources on our website. And again, you can always call as well. Would be happy to talk that through with you. In that line, we put a link to DATCAP in the resources below as well, which is a good starting point. DATCAP no longer regulates hemp, so they have no regulatory authority over that. As you'll see, however, they do still regulate the labeling of certain products, and they have a handout on that. But it does link to USDA, which currently regulates the hemp industry in Wisconsin. So it's a federal program that Wisconsin goes through for purposes of those of your customers that might be looking to engage or are engaged in the hemp industry. So with that, we always like to leave you with a quick reminder of the resources we have available to you. So on the WBA website, make sure you take a look to see what new compliance tools and resources we have for you there, as well as publications, training opportunities. If you're looking for training within a certain area, we have a section on our website that will go through the various topics that myself and Heather would be able to set up a training program with you. So if that's something you're interested in, take a look at the website and reach out to us. We'd be happy to discuss more about opportunities there. And don't forget the compliance hotline. You can call us or email us directly, and we'd be happy to discuss with you any questions you might have, be it topics that we had in this video or others that you're dealing with. So take a look at that website. Thanks for joining us this month. Have a good, happy new year, and we'll see you in the next video.